Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome to Kitchen Casual. My name is Craig, and today I will be teaching you how to make delicious roasted tomatoes. This is a hit every time that I prepare this dish, which I've made about a half a dozen times now, so it's absolutely fantastic. My girlfriend loves these. I'm actually making these today as sort of a surprise for her. It's Friday, the end of a long work week for her, very hard week, so I just wanted to have a nice, healthy snack ready for her when she got home from the office. So we'll be doing that with one of her favorites, the roasted tomatoes. Now, if you are new here, chances are you probably are new here, since this is the first cooking video ever on this channel. You may be watching this over on my main channel, Joker Productions, and if you are, I would encourage you to please come over to the Kitchen Casual channel, which I'll leave a link to right at the top of the description below if you want to subscribe and follow me what I'll be doing over there. For anyone that's new here and maybe this is the first video you are seeing, I've posted up a channel trailer to kind of explain my history as well as what will be happening on this channel going ahead in the future. So I strongly advise you to go and check that out on the channel page if you just want a little bit more information about what to expect here. But as I said, we'll be preparing roasted tomatoes, which is a very simple dish in the sense that it doesn't have a lot of ingredients, and pretty much anyone could make this to absolute perfection with minimal cooking knowledge. You just need a few ingredients, many of which you probably already have on hand. The only thing I had to pick up from the store for this recipe was the plum tomatoes or Roma tomatoes, depending on your grocery store or region. Some like to call them plum tomatoes, some like to call them Roma tomatoes. Don't worry, they're the exact same thing. You could probably even use other tomatoes if you wanted to. This is just how we've always done it, and yeah, it just works. So we're using plum tomatoes, bottom line. So for this recipe, you will need about a dozen or so of the plum tomatoes. I've only got 9 right here, fresh, already washed and cleaned and everything like that. If you just picked yours up from the grocery store, be sure to give them a quick rinse off in the sink in a strainer before you get started with anything. So you will need to have the plum tomatoes, as I said, about a dozen or so. If you want the full recipe, just be sure to look down in the description. Other things you will need is oregano, which I've got right here. You could use fresh oregano if you want, but I've just got some of the dry stuff. You will also need some Italian seasoning, some salt and pepper. I like to use the fresh grinders, honestly. Some crushed red pepper, which is optional. The crushed red pepper is optional. I like a little bit of heat in this to kind of balance out the acidity and the sweetness of the tomato. So a little bit of heat goes a long way, not to necessarily overpower you and make this a spicy dish. That's not the goal of the crushed red pepper. I don't want anyone to bite into these like, ooh, those are hot. I just want that slight little bit of heat in the background to kind of just balance out the rest of the flavors in this dish. You will also need a bulb of garlic, single bulb. I'll be using the entire head of that, and an onion. This is a sweet Vidalia onion, but you can use a Spanish onion, whatever you want. We just happen to like the sweet Vidalia onions here in our house, so that is what I will be using. Now you also want to have some good olive oil on hand as well. In addition to the oregano that I'll be putting on the top of the tomatoes after I get everything mixed together, I'll also be putting some fresh thyme, and if you wanted to do other herbs, you certainly can if you want to adapt this recipe to the flavors that you like. Rosemary would go along really well too. If you did like oregano, thyme, and rosemary, that would be a fantastic combination, one that I have done in the past. I just don't have any fresh rosemary on hand, so I'm going to be using the thyme here on it today. Now, before I get started with chopping anything up and slicing everything to get ready for this recipe, you always want to make sure you have a nice sharp knife on hand. So I always be sure to just run it through my sharpener a couple times before I start cutting, because a sharp knife is a safe knife. I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but trust me when I tell you, a sharp knife is a safe knife. So that should be good right there. Let's go ahead and get that out of the way, and we'll get started with our sweet Vidalia onion. The way I like to do these is you just kind of cut the ends off first, so I'll just go ahead and do that there. One end off, other end off. You don't want to take off too much, as you want to kind of leave as much of the onion back behind it as possible. And then I'll just cut it in half vertically like so, and just remove the sort of outer layer of skin, kind of the first layer of onion off of this guy, and I'll just set it off to the side here in a bowl so I can dump it in the garbage can later on. Now, as far as chopping the onion goes, I want to get a nice dice on this. I don't want any huge chunks of onion going on top of our delicate tomatoes. So I'm going to chop this pretty finely. The way I do it is here, you just kind of go vertically along the onion and just kind of get as close as you can with your cuts when you are doing this. Also, of course, always being as safe as possible, trying to keep your fingers away. When you are doing this, you don't want to go all the way through the onion. You want to kind of get as close as you possibly can to the onion, to the end of the onion, I should say, with the tip of your knife. So you want to get really close to the end, but not go all the way through. Otherwise, this is all going to fall apart when we get to the next part. Now, for this, you definitely want to be very careful. I like to kind of curl my fingers up there and get it on there, and then we will go horizontally across the onion. Since this piece is a little bit thicker, I'll probably go through here 3 times. So there's 1, 2, and 3. And you want to keep everything together, but also being very careful with your digits. You don't want to get any cuts or anything like that. Now that we've got that all done there, I didn't do the neatest job, honestly, of doing that in this one. I usually do a lot better. I'm a little nervous, though. Once you're done with that, you just want to kind of curl your fingers like this, hold it together, and then chop the onion horizontally. And this will give us relatively small chunks for going onto our tomatoes. And of course, you can use this method for chopping pretty much onion. This is just the standard way that you should really chop onions. And then once I'm done doing my chop like that, I'm just going to go through with my knife, just put the hand at the end here. You never want to take your hand off the knife, because if you do that, you're more likely to cut yourself if you put it down on the cutting board. So I always like to put my hand on top of the knife and then just kind of rock it back and forth here. And that'll give us a little bit of a finer chop here on the onions for some of the maybe the bigger, chunkier pieces. And like I said, I want to have a relatively fine onion, so I'm just going to go through here and just get this chopped up nice and fine. Alrighty, so we got our onion all chopped up. Let's move along and do the garlic now, which I do have a couple of little tips for you guys for the easiest way to really do this. To start off with the bulb, the way to really just get it out the quickest is just put the fat part of your knife on the back of it and just hit it with the palm of your hand. I actually just shot a clove of garlic right behind the friggin' oven. So be a little bit more gentle when you do it. This is kitchen casual. We don't really care about lost cloves of garlic. We got plenty to work with here. So we're just going to kind of pull this out of its little wrapper here and just kind of get all of our cloves in a row. This one actually is already peeled. Look at that. Popped right out. How good is that? Now for the garlic, to get these little shells off so you're not sitting here and peeling these forever, another quick way to get it off is just to use the heel of your knife yet again. Give it a smash, and that'll kind of crush it down a little bit, which starts the chopping process for you already if you are going to chop it. This one's already clean, as well as that one. Nothing on there. But the other ones, we just want to kind of go through, give these a quick smash so that the outside of it loosens up. That one's clean as well. Damn. Another one. I did a really good smash on that first thing. I mean, we may have lost 1 clove of garlic behind the oven, but we got like half of them already pre-peeled, so that's a win. And of course, after you smash them, you just kind of want to take it, now that these have all been loosened up, and just peel off the outer shell around each of the individual cloves of garlic. I'm going to be using an entire head of garlic for this recipe. If you don't like garlic as much, you could use less. If you like garlic a lot, you could use more, although this is probably what many people would already consider to be a pretty decent amount of garlic, but we love garlic in this house. Now, with our garlic peeled, you really have 2 ways you can go. You can, of course, go ahead and just throw a quick chop on this if you want. Very similar to the way we did our onions, just being very careful, of course, and just do a quick chop on it, and then you'll be done. However, I like to use a garlic press, as it kind of accelerates the process and just keeps it more uniform. I can usually stick 1 or 2 in there if I actually don't miss. And then I'll just kind of squeeze it out. Got a little glass bowl here. I'll just squeeze that out into there. And since I'm doing a bunch of these, I won't clean it out just yet. I'll just keep going 2 at a time into the garlic press. Squish it. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Get our last couple of cloves in there, and then when we're done, you just want to get this excess that's kind of hanging off the end there. Just use your knife. Just kind of slice it off. And there's usually a little bit inside as well. You just kind of want to pull it off and get all that garlicky goodness as much as you possibly can. We'll get this stuff out of the inside here just by scraping it once again with our knife right into our garlic bowl. And we've got some fresh thyme here as well that I'm going to be using. Just want to kind of peel these right into my bowl so it's not a mess. I don't need to chop these up any further. Just want to get a little bit of thyme in here for some flavor, and because I've got the time, really. So I'm going to use it because I've got extra time in more ways than one. All right, but now it is time for our tomatoes, so we're just going to go ahead and slice these in 3s very quickly, just 1 and 2. 2 cuts, so it's sliced into 3 pieces like that, and we'll just take that and we'll throw it off to our bowl here on the side, and then pretty much just rinse and repeat and go through all of our tomatoes until we've chopped them all into 3s. This one's being a little bit slippery. So there we go, we got that chopped into 3s. Just going to go ahead and keep on doing this until we got all of our tomatoes sliced relatively evenly as you possibly can, although if it's not super even, no one's going to yell at you. You're not going to have to go to the headmaster's office, so just don't worry about it. Just take your time, cut your tomatoes, and more importantly, have fun. All right, so we finally have everything ready here, ready to go. We've got all of our tomatoes, we got our garlic, we got our onion, we've got our thyme, got our olive oil right here. Now, if I was doing a dozen tomatoes, which I usually do for this recipe, I would do 1/3 cup, but since I only have 9 tomatoes, I'm going to cut it back a little bit and do 1/4 cup of olive oil. And don't worry if it kind of seems like a lot. At the end, we're going to put these onto a tray with parchment paper, so we can kind of leave oil behind as we go. We just want to make sure we have nice lubrication here for all of our tomatoes, and so that they're going to get roasted and crispy and nice and delicious. So we got our olive oil in there. At the same time, we also want to go ahead and drop in our whole bulb of garlic, which we already minced, or used a garlic press for, I should say. Put in our whole onion, dump that in, and clean it out. We don't want to leave any extra bits behind. And into the bowl right now at this point, we also want to do a tablespoon of Italian seasoning. So I'll go ahead and screw that off and just get my tablespoon out. I'm trying to get pretty close to a tablespoon. Do a tablespoon there and dump it in. I did just a touch less, honestly, because as I said, I'm only using 9 tomatoes, so I did a touch less, but for a dozen, you want to do a full tablespoon of the Italian seasoning, and I will do just a couple of dashes of the crushed red pepper, let's say about maybe a quarter to a half a teaspoon. If you want them really spicy, you can do a half a teaspoon. I'm just going to do about a quarter teaspoon. As I said, I just want to kind of balance out the heat. So that's all we need to add. Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing. We got to add our sugar. I've got some sugar in the raw here. You could use white sugar if you want to, but this is going to help cut through the acidity of the tomatoes, and this is definitely part of the recipe you do not want to miss out on. You just want to do a level tablespoon. As I said, I've got the raw sugar here. If you've got white sugar, you can definitely use that as well. And we'll just go ahead and put that in before we start mixing everything up. And so we're just going to start mixing up our tomatoes here. Being rather delicate, you don't want to go too rough on these, as they are tomatoes and they themselves are rather delicate. You just want to give this a gentle toss, make sure everything is coated around evenly. Like, you don't have to go nuts on this. Like I said, just kind of a gentle toss, making sure everything is incorporated with each other. Now, I've already got my oven preheating right now to 300 degrees, which we're going to roast them for at an hour on a baking sheet lined with parchment paper. I have all of this ready, and I advise you to do so as well before you start getting your hands in the olive oil and everything, because it's kind of a mess. You definitely want to wash your hands when you're done with this and not touch any camera gear, although I have to touch my camera when I'm done. All right, so that's really what you're looking for as far as incorporating, and just kind of stir it around, like I said, for about 30 seconds, and you should be good to go. Okay, so with our half sheet here already lined with parchment paper, you are going to need a fairly large sheet pan. You don't want to really have these too crowded, otherwise they'll end up kind of steaming rather than crisping up and cooking nice and roasting. And we're just going to lay these down on here evenly across the whole entire thing. Any of the ones that you have that sort of have like the back on at the outside of the tomato, do those face up, just like this. And once you're done laying everything out on your sheet pan, you're going to have quite a bit of onion and stuff left back in the bowl. So you want to go through and just basically put these on each of the onions individually. You could spoon these on if you want, but if you just finish mixing them, chances are your hands are dirty already anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and put them on by hand. Also kind of squeeze out, any of the excess, don't really squeeze, but let some of the excess oil kind of drip off as you're putting them on. You don't want to have a ton of extra oil on here, just really what you needed to coat them. So any excess oil we're just going to kind of leave behind in the pan, or in the bowl, I should say. Oh, I had to step away for a minute. My eyes were tearing up like you would not believe, even though they didn't tear up at all while I was chopping the onion. They very rarely do, honestly, but just now they were tearing up really bad. All right, so now that we got everything down on the pan, onions, everything, oven's preheated at 300 degrees. Last thing we got to do is our herbs, and of course salt and pepper, which we haven't done any salt and pepper up until now. So we definitely want to hit these up with a nice generous bit of salt. You can use sea salt, kosher salt, whatever you want. I'm actually using kosher salt, which I personally prefer. It's actually in a sea salt container, which I refilled with kosher salt because I don't have a grinder for it. And then of course some freshly ground pepper as well. If you don't have a fresh pepper grinder, then just use what you got on hand, just black pepper, perfectly fine. So we've got our salt and pepper on there, and then we're going to go through and hit these up with the oregano. You want to go kind of delicate. You don't need to, oregano is a pretty powerful seasoning, so you don't need to go crazy on this. You just kind of want to put a light dusting across the top of the tomatoes. All right, so since our oven is preheated and these are all ready to go, let's go ahead and slide those into the oven there. Like I said, 300 degrees. We're going to leave those for 1 hour to go here, and then after an hour, we're going to crank up the temperature to 425 for about another 5 to 10 minutes or so, which is going to help put some color on these, and we'll go ahead and cut ahead now to when we do that. So tomatoes just came out of the oven. They've been in there for an hour, as I said, at 300 degrees, and I've just cranked up the oven to 425 degrees because we're going to put these back in for about another 5 to 10 minutes, and we're just going to kind of keep a close eye on them during that period of time so that they don't burn, overcook, or anything along those lines. And this would be a fantastic time. If you wanted to, you can go ahead and sprinkle some mozzarella cheese on there or some Parmesan. Whatever you want to do, you could put some cheese on the top of these. And during this last 5 to 10 minutes where the bottoms are kind of crisping up and finishing cooking, that cheese will melt too and just kind of incorporate with the tomatoes and just be absolutely delicious. It's something that I've done in the past, but we're not going to be doing it this time because my girlfriend just wants to bring these throughout the week for work, for snacks. Not really snack, really for lunch, I guess. And we're not going to do any cheese on these today, but if you want to, you can definitely put some cheese on these and kick them up a notch for sure. So these went in for about another 7 minutes at 425 degrees, and they are perfect right now. If you're looking at this, you don't need to be worried about like the black stuff like around the tomatoes. That's really not a big deal. That's kind of this, like the oil and the onions and stuff that kind of spilled over. But the bottoms are absolutely perfect. You can see just a little bit of darkness on there is really what you're going for, just a tiny bit of darkness. And yeah, these are absolutely beautiful. Even though the tray itself might not look the most appealing, the tomatoes themselves smell phenomenal. Like, oh my God, it just smells like the world's greatest pasta sauce in here right now. But that is the first episode of Kitchen Casual in the books, which I'm really glad to have kind of gotten under my belt so we can move forward and I can continue learning in the future. This is really the first cooking video I've ever done, and I learned quite a bit just going through on this first video on things I can refine in the future and improve over time. If you have any suggestions, for sure, let me know down in the comments below if you have suggestions for how I can improve these videos, recipes you would maybe like to see in videos. I definitely look forward to that discussion in the comments below always, so let me know that for sure. These roasted tomatoes, as I said, we make these all the time. They are perfect for just a quick, healthy snack. If you're having guests over, maybe you're having like a party, a game night, something like that, these would be a perfect finger food to kind of put out on the table as either an appetizer, or if you guys are just doing a lot of hors d'oeuvres anyway, this would certainly be a good entry into that. Another thing you could do with these roasted tomatoes is you can make the most unbelievable tomato sauce with them by putting them in a food processor. If you just take them as is after they're finished cooking and just throw them in your food processor, you get a really nice tomato sauce. Maybe that's something we'll look to do in a future video. Who knows? Hopefully we'll have many more videos on the channel. I look forward to seeing all of you in the comments on all of them. Many of the videos, many videos in the future, hopefully. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get on out of here, guys. I look forward to, well, I think I said that already. I look forward to many things. Many things are being looked forward to. Goes without saying, doesn't it? So yeah, I'm gonna get out of here. I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.